queering means destroying the legitimacy of anything. And you used a word in a speech I heard you give in Calgary, and then I've seen you use the word. I didn't understand it, so I Googled it. And I love learning new words. And I feel like, I have a lot of words, but I'd never heard this word before. You used the word Lysenkoism, and I Googled it, and it's named after a man, Lysenko. He was a Soviet communist in Russia. And I want to see if I understand it, and maybe you can explain it. You talk about Lysenkoism. Is Lysenkoism, and it was the man, I forget his first name, Lysenko, did he actually try to queer science and to say, I deny the science of agricultural genetics. I have a Marxist explanation, and we have to actually silence the actual empirical scientists instead. Help me understand, what's Lysenkoism? Is it part of queer theory? Did I understand it correctly? I just started reading about Lysenkoism and Lamarckism and genetics, and I thought, what am I doing? Let me ask Dr. James Lindsay, what's Lysenkoism, and how does it apply to our lives?
Well, I appreciate you setting me up to tell you in paraphrase of one of the greatest of all time, that I have the best words. That is true. I have absolutely the best words. But Lysenkoism is an important word. The first name you're looking for is Trofim. Trofim Lysenko was the Soviet agriculturalist name. And in the technical definition of the word queering, he would not have recognized the word queering. The Soviet Union was not particularly nice to gay people, but in the what the word means, to override legitimacy in favor of ideology, certainly he was queering agricultural science, and what he believed was absolutely insane. He believed that if you applied communist theory to plants, that they would grow better, but you might have to actually teach the plants or lecture to the seeds. So you have people reading Soviet literature or Marxist theory to seeds before they plant them, and they would plant them in high density areas, not within inadequate water, within inadequate fertilizer and soil conditions, thinking that they would communally help one another and grow better. And in fact, that the oats could become barley under the right conditions, because he rejected Western so-called bourgeois genetics, which turned out to be correct. And he came up with a different kind, because he couldn't have what the West uses. And he applied this science, and more importantly, Stalin behind him put the full weight of the Soviet state behind this bogus approach to science. And the result was exactly what you would predict: famines, massive famines. Trofim Lysenko was famous for having remarked that given enough time, you could convince the oranges to grow in Siberia. And so he thought that you could override nature completely in terms of the vision of the ideological structure of Soviet communism. In this case, it's a different theory, that we can override nature and biology completely by applying queer theory to developmental psychology, to chemistry, to whatever else. So it's the same model. And what we see happening in medicine, very widely supporting these transgender medicine policies and so on, really boils down to a medical Lysenkoism that uses queer theory. It's not agricultural Lysenkoism, but the result will be the same. If you apply a bogus theory to a science that has to do with living and dying, many people are going to die. So we can expect, we can predict, we don't have to guess. There will be millions of people who are psychologically or physically injured. It's called iatrogenic harm, psychologically or physically mutilated through surgeries and through chemical manipulations. We can predict that this will happen with 100% certainty, because this is what happens when the state begins to enforce a ideology that rejects legitimacy, that rejects reality, that rejects positive facts and stable truth in favor of whatever this belief system happens to be.
You know, I think there was some agricultural Lysenkoism at play in Sri Lanka recently, when they decided to reject almost a century's worth of knowledge about fertilizer and modern agriculture, the Green Revolution that Norman Borlaug helped birth. And let's go.
The word they use is sustainability.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sustainability is the word that they're using for agricultural and energy production Lysenkoism today.
And it had devastating effects in Sri Lanka. They're trying to do it in the Netherlands. They're talking about doing it in Canada too. That's Lysenkoism. That's ideology overcoming scientific biology. That's telling farmers We have better ideas than you. We've never set foot on a farm. Our hands are smooth. We think food comes from a grocery store, but we are going to instruct you farmers on the better way to farm that's ideologically superior. They are saying almost exactly those words right now. I remember, here's a clip of the former Environment Minister, Catherine McKenna, lecturing farmers about just farming better. Here, take a look at this blast from the past. Thank God she's not in the cabinet anymore, but now she works for the UN. Take a look. It's basically her saying farmers ought to learn some better systems.
And I've seen amazing innovations in farming, for example, zero-till agriculture. Using less water, using smart technologies, artificial intelligence to, figure out how you can use less fertilizer, how you can, do a better job tilling, how you can get better results. We can all do this, but if we don't, the impact will be dire on farms.
That is a 21st century Lysenkoist telling farmers how to farm better. We're going to all starve if this actually happens. We're going to have plane crashes if they replace, heteronormative cisgender engineering with queer engineering. We're going to have a lot of people dying if we allow the queering of science on the things that we depend on for our lives.
This is textbook Lysenkoism. You're absolutely right. The consequences you're absolutely right. Why Stalin backed Lysenko was because he was giving a refutation of so-called Western bourgeois agriculture and biology in favor of a Soviet one. So if Lysenko was proved right, two things would happen. First, the Soviet Union would become the most productive nation on earth, and it will have done so by validating Marxist theory. And so because of the structure of the Soviet regime, which was completely ideologically captured, Lysenko had to be right. In other words, he had to be forced to be made right. So all the scientists who disagreed, they took away their medical licenses. Oh, I'm sorry, wait, that's COVID. I mixed up my eras. All the scientists who disagreed actually got sent to re-education in the Gulag, which is roughly the equivalent. They were chased out of their universities, they were chased out of their laboratories, or they were killed, outright murdered for disagreeing with Lysenko and his ideas, and they were completely purged. This actually caused a secondary problem in Soviet Union, which was that they had a massive brain drain. And so later, when things got a little further on and World War II rolled around and they suddenly needed rocket scientists, quite literally, they needed physics, they needed rocket science, they needed munitions and rations for their troops. They had a major problem on their hands because they didn't have the stock. They didn't have scientists that knew science anymore. And they had to start building that from the ground up. And they lost a lot of that. And it took them a very long time. It may very well be that part of the reason that they ultimately lost the Cold War, at least in the explicit sense, was because of this huge brain drain that it caused them in the 1930s, primarily through the Lysenkoist experiment.